wife and I nearly divorced before her cancer diagnosis. After her passing, my son accused me of cheating for remarrying, so I revealed his mother's affair. Hey everyone, I just wanted to share a bit about my family situation. It's kind of complicated, so I'm really hoping you all can keep an open mind and not judge me or my ex-wife too quickly. So here's the deal. I'm a 42-year-old guy, and I met my late wife Rita back in college. We got together right after we graduated and stayed together for almost 20 years. We have a 15-year-old son. Sadly, we lost Rita to ovarian cancer almost 3 years ago. The thing is, Rita was diagnosed about 2 years before she passed away. At that time, both of us were actually considering getting a divorce. Things just hadn't been great between us for a long time, and neither of us was happy. We kept up appearances for our son's sake, but had been struggling for 4 or 5 years before we finally admitted it. One day, Rita sat me down and said she wasn't happy anymore. A lot had changed since we first got married, and I knew it too. Honestly, even though I should have felt bad, I was mostly relieved. We agreed to tell our son about the separation within a few days, but then, just a week later, Rita was diagnosed with cancer. Divorce was immediately off the table because we couldn't handle that alongside her illness. Rita did give me an out, though. She revealed she'd been cheating on me for about 6 months before we talked about divorce. She hadn't planned to tell me about the affair until after the divorce because she was scared of my reaction. But her diagnosis made her conscience kick in, and she felt she needed to come clean. Even though I felt sad and betrayed, I decided to stay because of my commitment in sickness and in health. Plus, our son was only 10 at the time, and I didn't think he would understand. We never spoke about the divorce again and kept up a front for our son until Rita passed away. We did tell our families about everything to avoid drama later on. My parents were cool with it, but her family was a bit iffy. Still, Rita was clear about what she wanted, and I stayed with her until the end. I don't regret it, despite everything. After she passed, I kept in touch with her family. They visit occasionally to check on me and my son. It's mostly been me and him, and while he misses his mom a lot, so do I sometimes. But I've been trying to move on. By the time Rita was diagnosed, both of us had pretty much fallen out of love and were headed for divorce. About 6 months after Rita's passing, I met Elle through work. There was an instant spark, but I held back because I was still mourning. She ended up asking me out, and I couldn't resist saying yes. A year after Rita passed, I went on my first date again and felt really happy. Rita and I had talked about it before she died, and she was fine with me dating after she was gone. She had cheated because she was unhappy, so at least I was looking for love after marriage. I explained all this to Elle, and she was really understanding. We kept things quiet for a couple of months to avoid any drama with Rita's family. After about 6 months of dating, I decided to introduce her to my son. It didn't go as well as I hoped. He was pretty cold towards her, probably because he didn't expect me to date so soon. So, back when another woman, his mother, passed away so suddenly, I knew that eventually, when the time was right and he was old enough, I'd have to come clean to my son about the truth. You see, I really liked Elle, and I was serious about being with her. I didn't give up and kept trying to get him to warm up to her. He was always really cold, but civil whenever she was around, not outright mean, just distant. Since he wasn't purposely being nasty to her, we decided not to address the issues immediately. Everything was still pretty fragile at that point. Then recently, Elle and I got engaged. We're planning to get married in the next few weeks. It's all happening so fast, but I wanted her to move in with me. She said she wasn't comfortable moving in until she had a ring on her finger due to issues in her last relationship. We've been together for almost 2 years now, and my parents and my son knew about her, so I saw no reason not to get married. I proposed to her just a few days after our talk. She was skeptical at first, but said yes soon enough. I got her to agree to move in with me, but when I told my son, he threw a temper tantrum, thinking it was too soon. I tried to make him understand my perspective without spilling the whole truth, but he called me a cheater. That's when I realized I had to be honest. After he calmed down, I explained everything about his mother and me. Our marriage was falling apart, her affair, and the agreement we had made. Now that she was gone and enough time had passed, I wanted to live life on my terms, but only if he was okay with it. I wasn't sure if he'd understand since he's still really young. Though he seemed confused, he told me he'd be fine with it. I was so relieved. A few days after our talk, Elle moved in with us. Once Elle moved in, I knew I couldn't keep the relationship hidden from Rita's family anymore. My family had known about Elle from the beginning, but I hadn't told my ex-in-laws because I didn't know how to bring it up. Honestly, I didn't think it was necessary because this was my life now. They came over a couple of days after Elle moved in to see my son, and when they saw Elle, they were very confused. I had to explain that I had been with her for the past 2 years and we were now engaged. They didn't say much but looked annoyed, which baffled me since they knew about my arrangement with Rita and her earlier affair. I was within my rights to move on. After I told them about our engagement, they congratulated me, but their tone said it all. After a while, my ex-brother-in-law Jonathan asked me to step outside for a smoke, which I knew was code for wanting to talk. Once outside, he congratulated me again and started asking questions, how long we'd been together, when we met, trying to figure out if there was any overlap. It was pretty annoying, but I put up with it. Eventually, he asked how my son was taking it. I told him that initially he was pissed and called me a cheater, but after I explained the situation, he seemed to understand and was giving Elle a chance. Jonathan was shocked I'd told my son the truth so soon after losing his mother and started freaking out, saying it was too early and not the right time. But I thought it was right to let him know, so I did. As his father, I didn't think I had to answer to anyone, but I didn't want to argue with Jonathan. I suggested we go back inside, and when we did, he whispered something to my in-laws. They quickly said goodbye to my son and left. About an hour later, my father-in-law called, saying they were really disappointed I'd told my son the truth without consulting them first. I didn't see why they expected me to discuss it with them beforehand. This was my son, my marriage, my decision. My son is 15, and if I think he's old enough to understand, that should be enough. We got into a heated argument, and I eventually hung up because I wasn't interested in arguing with people who wouldn't understand. They insisted I was ruining my son's perception of his mother by telling him these things and said I needed to do some damage control. I didn't think that was necessary. It's not like my son suddenly hated his mother. He still remembered her fondly, but now things were just a bit more complicated. That's life. I don't think I did anything wrong by telling him the truth, but the more I argued with them, the angrier they seemed to get. So, by the end of the call, John was pretty much threatening to fight me for custody of my son. He didn't think I was a good enough dad if I was handling things this way. John believed I was messing with my son's feelings, saying things that suited me rather than thinking about my son's emotions and maturity. He accused me of only coming clean because I wanted to live with Elle and couldn't handle my son not liking my girlfriend. John made it sound like I was being selfish, throwing Rita under the bus without considering how it would affect my son. Since that call, I've been second-guessing everything, not sure if I did the right thing by telling my son that his mom, who passed away 3 years ago, had an affair while we were married. A bit more about Elle and me since you guys were curious about our relationship. I mentioned before that she wanted a ring on her finger before moving in with me. It's not because she's a gold digger or anything, despite what some of you speculated. Elle had a rough time in her last relationship. She spent almost 4 years with a guy who led her on, only to find out he had a whole other family and a wife in another state. He kept promising to marry her, but that never happened, and their breakup was really tough on her. She didn't date anyone for the next 4 years until she met me. So after that kind of experience, it makes sense she'd want some commitment from me. I totally get it and don't judge her for it. She's accepted all my baggage and issues, so I'm doing the same for her. Some folks thought it was weird how quickly my son came to terms with what his mom did. Just to clarify, I told him about my decision to have L move in with us in the morning, and by the time he agreed, it was almost midnight. I explained everything to his mom in the morning after his outburst, and he had the whole day to think it over. I didn't bother him at all that day. He was just quietly sitting in his room, probably doing some serious thinking. By the end of the day, he was okay with me moving on with my life. I assured him I wouldn't feel bad if he needed more time, and that I was willing to put all my plans with Elle on hold for his sake. There was zero pressure, trust me. I would never do anything to jeopardize my relationship with my son. He's a mature kid for his age, and I think he just wanted me to be happy, which is why he was willing to give Elle and our relationship a chance. Update time! It's been 5 days since my original post, and after I blocked my in-laws, they haven't tried to contact me. They might be plotting something behind my back, but honestly, I couldn't care less. My focus is on my son's feelings right now. After everything John and my in-laws accused me of, I've been feeling really off. Some people left pretty nasty comments on the post, though there were a lot of supportive ones too. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being selfish. I talked to Lena about it, and she assured me I wasn't being selfish. She said I deserved a chance to be happy, and if that meant being with her, I shouldn't let it go. That made me feel a bit better. She suggested that I talk to my son and ask him how he felt about everything, which seemed like solid advice. A couple of days ago, I finally sat down with my son to talk. After I told him about the situation with his mom, we tried to brush it under the rug because it was awkward and heartbreaking. Rita's gone now, and neither of us wanted to ruin our memories of her. But the truth is, it was a big deal, and that's why we were so nervous about talking it through. We started off with a superficial conversation, trying to convince each other we were fine, but eventually, he broke down. He told me that since the big reveal, he'd been looking at things differently and mainly felt bad that both of us had to sacrifice so much to make sure he didn't feel bad. He felt responsible for everything. I'm glad we talked, because I never would have known. Then he felt that way otherwise. I comforted him as best as I could and told him that he was the one thing that made both his mom and me extremely happy. He was always the glue that held our family together, and I couldn't be more thankful. I explained that even though we're adults, we make mistakes too, and it's complicated and difficult trying to be perfect. He seemed to understand and said that both of us always made him feel safe and happy. He was so happy to be our son, and we made a promise to each other. No more secrets, ever. Secrets just make things messy, you know? Now that he's older and I can see he's mature enough to handle stuff, there's really no reason to hide anything from him. But even with that, we both wanted to work on our relationship. He's still a young boy, and he's already been through so much. I don't want any of it to weigh him down, so we decided it'd be best if we both went to therapy, separately and together. That way, we could really work on fixing things for the future. I think it'll be great for both of us. When I talked to Lena about it, she totally agreed. After Lena and I finished talking, we had a family meeting. I told him about how his grandparents, my in-laws, reacted when I said he knew everything. I promised not to keep secrets from him, and this was me trying to keep that promise. When I told him, he said his grandparents and uncle were just being ridiculous. He didn't think I had done anything wrong at all. He agreed he might not be an adult, but he was definitely old enough to understand and handle family stuff. It was totally fine with him. What I told him might have changed his view of his mom a bit, but it didn't ruin it like everyone thought it would. He even told me that if they ever came back and tried to turn him against me, he wouldn't stand for it. Hearing that made me so happy because, despite everything, I am still the person he loves and trusts the most. I intend to live up to that forever. Now that everything's out in the open, my in-laws and Jonathan see, and bring it on. I've got Lena and my son's support, and that's all I need. Last time we met, I let them walk all over me because I wasn't sure of myself. But that's changed now. So yeah, Let them bring it on. Update 2. After almost 2 weeks of no contact, my ex-in-laws and Jonathan showed up this morning with their lawyer and a stack of paperwork for me to terminate my parental rights. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Jonathan said they were there to take my son off my hands because I clearly wasn't interested in being a father anymore, and I was more into frolicking with Elle. Weird thing to say, right? I told him to get out almost immediately. He refused and started yelling for my son to come downstairs since it was the weekend and he wasn't at school. That's when I lost it and shoved him, which I shouldn't have done. But then he shoved me back, and we got into this nasty fight. It was so stupid, 2 grown men brawling like that. My ex-father-in-law and the lawyer finally broke us apart, and Elle heard the commotion, so she rushed in and held me back. Even my son heard the noise and came downstairs. I kept telling him to go back to his room, but Jonathan yelled at him that he was free to leave now. My son just stood there and politely declined, which shocked Jonathan and his parents. They tried to tell him he had no reason to stay with me, but my son said he wanted to stay because I was his father, and he trusted me. He even told his uncle he admired how much they cared, but that he didn't need rescuing. My ex-in-laws argued, saying he was too young to know what was good for him, but my son insisted he trusted my judgment. That calmed me down a lot. I told Jonathan to leave, since my son made his decision, but he kept standing there, insisting my son didn't know what was right for him. My son got frustrated and told them he just wanted to be left alone. He said they didn't know him or even their own daughter as well as they thought. Jonathan then started yelling at my son, calling him all sorts of names. I shoved him again, and this time he lost his balance. I took the chance to slam the door shut and told him to leave or I'd call the cops. He eventually left after cursing me out. Afterward, I gave my son a big bear hug, and he hugged me right back before heading to his room. I just hope Jonathan and my ex-in-laws get the message now they can't brainwash my son against me. Update 3. Hello, everyone. Quite some time has passed, and as of now, Lena and... So, quick update on my life. I got married a couple of years ago in this intimate and sweet little ceremony right in our backyard. It was super small, mostly just family, and a handful of our closest friends. My son stood by me as my best man, which is pretty incredible given how rocky our relationship was not too long ago. We were actually at each other's throats for a bit because my now wife had to move in with us. But hey, fast forward to now, and he's there by my side at my wedding. A lot of our progress is thanks to some serious therapy sessions we've been doing, both individually and together, over the past few weeks. It's really paid off. Oh, and just a quick side note about Jonathan and his parents. Ever since that big blowout at my house, where my son really put them in their place, we haven't heard a word from them. We've got them blocked everywhere so they can't reach out even if they wanted to. And honestly, if they try anything, I'm not afraid to file for a restraining order. I think we've made it pretty clear we don't want them around unless they come back with serious apologies and try to make things right, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. Anyway, the big takeaway here is that my family is happy, and that's more than I ever hoped for. Life is good.